Dead Island 2 is unabashed zombie schlock. It has the vibe of a video nasty that your dad has a worn out VHS copy of, a prize that you'd sneak out at sleepovers, hailing it as the most disgusting film ever made. At times, images from Dead Island 2 feel like they would be more at home on Live Leak than on a modern games console, making it the unlikely venue of the forefront in the debate on when video game violence gets a bit too realistic. You can also easily picture an American news anchor who looks like the blow-up doll from Airplane talking about how this game is destroying the youth in the Jack Thompson era of video game hysteria. God, is it good fun. And all of that serves as a helpful barometer by which to judge whether or not Dead Island 2 will be for you. For a game so comically long in development, although this version of the game is substantially different from the Dead Island 2 announced all those years ago, Dead Island 2 is a lot more like the first game in the series than we had expected. You're exploring a modern day environment in the wake of an outbreak, along the way picking up weapons that are laying around, combining them with household objects in order to make them better at mutilation. The game literally starts with your character being shot out of the sky while on a plane attempting to escape LA, so you know exactly where you are sitting when it comes to the intended tone. Even the game's most serious moments have their tongue so firmly against their cheek that it's practically sticking through it. You can choose between a handful of survivors, each of which has unique stats and abilities that affect how they play. These characters aren't as desperate as you'd perhaps expect from the introduction, and sadly they're not quite as interesting as they could have been. For example, we picked a character that is essentially rapper Lil Pump, although for legal reasons is not, thinking that their dialogue would be full to the brim of toe-curlingly cringe modern pop culture references that we were looking for, but it never sails close to how interesting the character could be based on the intro. The reason for that is obvious, as is the fact that all the NPC dialogue has to be applicable to every character, meaning lots of they them pronouns when speaking to them, and enough non-specific gestures to your character that means you may as well be playing as a bin man. The dialogue in general, outside of a nice selection of wacky side missions, is pretty buttoned up along the main path, although the side missions do let their hair down significantly. This is the franchise that opened the first game with the immortal lines, "I've got a zombie on me and you can't harm me, who do you voodoo bitch?" Nothing in Dead Island 2 comes quite close to that silliness for our liking, apart from the 1 million times that line is mentioned. However, while that's a bit of a shame, it's only really an issue in single player. Dead Island 2 features co-op for almost all of the campaigns, so you're not really going to be listening to what's going on while your friends tell you about what they're having for dinner or where you're going on holiday. It's hard to think of a game that isn't improved by co-op, but it's stark just how much easier co-op makes Dead Island 2. Boss fights feel very designed for one player, so while one distracts, the other one can be free to turn the various hulking zombies into kebab meat. This brings us to the absolute star of the show, the gore. Dead Island 2 is a rare game where you wonder if posting footage of it will get you banned from social media platforms, such as the realistic nature of the violence. All we've had heads that explode and limbs that fly off for some time, but what about jaws that hang by a single thread of tissue, eyes popping out of the head and dangling on the cheeks of victims, pulsing organs that you can watch slowly empty from the inside of rib cages? What about realistically burning flesh, or flesh that peels off in piles of goo when doused in acid? It is absolutely disgusting, fascinating, and incredibly impressive. Playing through the game, we wondered where we'd get to that moment where we turn the corner and the street is suddenly filled with thousands of zombies, a la Dead Rising, but it never happened, and then it occurred to us why. Each of the zombies is an incredibly complex model, capable of being reduced to a pile of chunks. And while it would be a lot of fun to do that to a chorus line of zombies, the granular detail of every bit of sinew and limb feels like it would bring even the strongest PC to its knees. There will be some people for whom the gore is a bit too much, but equally there will be horror fanatics that drink it up. We think it hugely elevates the game's combat, especially as it's obvious feedback as to how much damage you're doing, what kind of weapons you should be using, and more than anything, it is absolutely hilarious to punch someone directly through the face. Dead Island 2 features a great suite of melee weapons and a solid selection of firearms too. As soon as we got our hands on the shotgun and the katana, we were set. But there's a lot to choose from, all of which come with unique and grisly animations. For example, there's an electrified fishing pole that features the special move of shoving it directly under the chin of the zombie and zapping them off the end, often with head exploding results, and this never stops being funny. The game's skill system allows players to pick certain cards from a large deck, which affects things like movement abilities, stats, and most vitally, your suite of abilities when you become a zombie. Through plot-related mischief, you have the ability to briefly unleash your zombie side. This turns the carnage up to utter nonsense tier and makes even the toughest bosses fall to bits. Later you'll unlock a card which means the more zombies you kill, the longer you can stay zombified. At this point the only thing that will stop you is your controller dying. It's fun, but it trivializes basically every encounter. Dead Island 2 is extremely silly, comically violent and consistently enjoyable. It's almost impossible to stop smiling while playing, such as the slapstick laugh of limbs flying off in every direction. The smart skill system and the wide range of weapons mean that throughout the game's brisk 15-hour main campaign offering, you're never bored of liberating the heads from the shoulders of the undead. LA itself is a wonderful playground of varied locations, and though we'd have preferred a fully open world, if the trade-off is for the exceptional flesh system, then it's no contest.